systems for the entire business. So then the question becomes, well, how did this emerge? How did this focus at the lower levels of Lean tools and Lean as an operating system emerge? How was it that they never recognized the respect for people principle? How was it that they spent so many years doing what I call fake Lean? Well, first of all, they had a goal of reducing operating costs, so their understanding of Lean was extremely narrow, and the methodology at the time, they characterized it as using Japanese Lean techniques. So what I'm going to show you now are some faulty assumptions, decision-making traps, and illogical thinking. So we'll begin with the faulty assumptions, and that was the purpose of Lean is to cut costs. So they didn't do any research into understanding what is the purpose and intent of Lean management. They saw it narrowly as to cut costs, and they had some pressing quality issues, so they included that as part of their understanding of what the purpose of Lean was. They felt that Lean tools could be mandated, that they could just tell, that leaders could just tell other people, you need to use these Lean tools. The leaders felt that they didn't have to get directly involved to understand these Lean tools or apply those Lean tools not only to participation in Kaizen in the shop and office, but also to their own work. They felt that managers are the ones who must work differently. Excuse me, the workers are the ones who must work differently. The managers can continue doing things the way they've always done them. They also viewed that the performance metrics that they were using were appropriate and were not in need of change. And this is a big miss, because the performance metrics that the company used and which most companies use are built for batch and queue processing, and in Lean we're trying to achieve flow, so we need to eliminate many of the metrics we normally use, substitute them with different metrics, or we need to de-emphasize certain of those batch and queue metrics in decision making. And finally, they felt that Lean will prosper in a political blame people for problems type of environment. Next, we have decision-making traps, and in each one of these cases, the faulty assumptions, the decision-making traps, and so on, this is a shortened list of what's actually going on. There are many more faulty assumptions than what I've shown you here. Decision-making traps, such as Lean is continuous improvement tools for managers toolkit. So the view that this is just, you just add these Lean tools to your existing toolkit and mix it all together and off you go. Status quo oriented, that you can continue to do what we're doing, which is we make improvements and then we lay people off and outsource work, and Lean will help us do more of that. The confirmation bias that Lean is something for operations. This viewpoint did change after about 8 years or so. It started to branch out into other parts of the business, but a fairly narrow view for a substantial period of time. And then we have some forms of illogical thinking, basically that if we use Lean tools, then we're going to achieve cost savings, and if we don't use Lean tools, then there's no cost savings. And they ignored basically the new product development and other things that you could do to grow the business, as well as other things you could do to secure cost savings. Using and abusing tradition, they felt that they've been in business for a long time, so they know what they're doing. So there is no need to test any of these faulty assumptions or determine whether or not we're falling into any of these decision-making traps and so forth. There's a continuation of a pattern of blaming people when problems occurred, and the budget, was the thing that mattered the most. So this is how they got started with this, under these kinds of conditions, this way of thinking, and it laid the groundwork for poor outcomes, as you will see in a moment. They were also an organization that had a lot of bureaucracy and internal organizational politics. Now, so what that does is it changes the clock speed by which the organization runs. So on the left we have a clock showing the normal hours and minutes and seconds, and an organization that has a lot of bureaucracy and politics, time slows down. So decision making and things get done more on the order of days and hours, but in a highly bureaucratic and highly political organization, things slow down even more, so that things get done on the time scale of months and weeks. And so this organization now recognizes they're trying to apply Lien for narrow reasons of cutting costs and improving quality and so forth, and not realizing what they really need to do is improve material and information flow. And so you have the bureaucracy and organizational politics that stand in the way of the ultimate objective that you're trying to achieve. Improving material and information flow, of course, have the outcomes associated with it of reducing costs and improving quality and so on. So they did what most organizations do, is they did a lot of Kaizen, but they did what's called point Kaizen. They did Kaizen in many Kaizens in many different areas, but they were unable to connect the dots to achieve flow. So while you have highly efficient processes, narrowly within a given overall process, there isn't connectivity between the various processes that lead to satisfying a particular customer's demand. So the processes remain disconnected. They have islands of efficiency, but they don't have flow. And then they understood Lien in this zero-sum way of we make improvements, then that enables us to lay people off. Before Kaizen, the process took 7 people to do. After Kaizen, it takes 3 people, so therefore we can lay off 4 people. And they made the big mistake of not realizing that when Lien has zero-sum outcomes particularly for employees, when it's a win for the company but a loss for the employees that remain lose their enthusiasm for participating in Kaizen. So they do not offer their best ideas for problem solving. They withhold information. They withhold ideas. They're not enthusiastic about this, and so on. And these all put a large damper on one's efforts to improve processes in an organization. So there's a simple cause and effect that's going on here, where if employees suffer bad outcomes as a result of continuous improvement, then they withdraw and refuse to participate. Now, they will, of course, go through the motions of involvement in Kaizen, but their involvement will be very limited and made in a way so that bad outcomes for them are not the result. So this zero-sum approach that was long embedded within the organization was extended into the use of Lien management erroneously. What you see here are the pioneers of progressive management and the people that contributed to the development and the evolution of what today we call Lien management. The gentleman on the left is Frederick Taylor. He is the so-called father of scientific management. He did his work in the United States in the 1890s, 1880s to early 1900s. In the middle is Frank Woolard from the UK. He did his work in progressive management in the 1910s and 20s and 30s. And Taiichi Ohno in the post-World War II period, 1947 to about 1978. And none of these people were academics. They were all workers in an organization who worked their way up to become supervisors, to become mid-level managers, and later to become executives. And as supervisors, they did what supervisors normally do, which is they say to the people reporting to them, I've got a better way of doing something, let's do it my way. And so they go implement some sort of improvement, but usually suffer from backslide. The improvement is undone over a short period of time. And the reason for that is because the workers are not bought into that improvement. And so they realize that you can't just improve in a way that diminishes the involvement, the interests of the worker in particular. You have to improve in a way that results in better outcomes for them as well. And so over time, and it's very clear in their writings, that they recognized two principles. In Frederick Taylor's day, it was betterment and cooperation. In those days, there was big issues in terms of labor and management cooperation. In Frank Woolard's day, he referred to it as continuous improvement and benefit for all, meaning there must be a benefit for employees, for the company, for customers, and so on as a result of these improvements that are made. And then today, Kaizen, or continuous improvement and respect for people. So the message here is let's learn from what these pioneers have learned from. Let's not make the mistake that this company that we've been talking about that spent more than 10 years of effort focused on continuous improvement and ignoring or being unaware of the respect for people principle. Now, as you move forward with Lien, you're trying to achieve flow, and flow changes everything. The mistake that this organization made is they thought that they could just bolt some Lien knowledge on to their current knowledge, and that would be sufficient. Then they would make a great progress as a result of doing so. And the reality, what happens here is that flow changes everything. I mean, it's a complete change in the way that you think about things, a complete change in the way that you go about doing things. So what has to happen is your current knowledge has to shrink over time. And you have to grow and develop new Lien knowledge. And the way you grow and develop this new Lien knowledge is by participating in the application of Lien principles and practices. That means as a manager, as an executive, as a supervisor, you have to do the same types of things that you're asking workers to go do, which is to apply Lien principles and practices to improve processes. So managers, executives, they have to become engaged in Kaizen, both on the shop and office floor, and then they also need to apply Lien principles and practices to their own managerial work so that they understand how to improve, again, both material and information flow. So this is a substantial change in one's way of thinking and in how one goes about doing things. And you have to question everything. It requires a curiosity and inquisitive mind, somebody who asks, should we keep using the same metrics? Are they consistent with what we're trying to achieve here or not? And of course, in most cases, the metrics will not be consistent, and so those things need to change. So the challenge is to help managers understand where they are in their level of knowledge with Lien. Now, this company that spent more than 10 years but didn't have much success had a fundamental problem where the managers were at level 1. They know of or have heard the concepts, but they thought they were at level 5 to be able to apply these concepts and teach it well to others. So they made a fundamental error in confusing knowing about something with the ability to do something. So let me give you an example. It's one thing to know how to, to have heard about how to make a bookshelf, but it's another thing to be able to actually make one and teach it to others. So likewise, to go through this progression, to know of or to have heard the concepts, to being able to do it and teach it well to others, means you have to engage in practice. In fact, daily practice. You have to apply Lien principles and practices daily to be able to do it well and teach it to others. So in this company, as you saw earlier, basically mandated the use of Lien tools by employees and exempted themselves from the application and understanding of those tools. We have generally a mindset that's opposite of what's needed. So the executive mindset was success-oriented and basically ignore failures. In Lien, the mindset is to pay attention to failures and ask why and have curiosity as to why things failed. The typical executive mindset was they're very distracted and overconfident. When it comes to organizational change, they want to be told what to do, but then they can elect not to do it if they wish. Lien, of course, is one of many paths to improvement, one of many paths to success, but it's probably the hardest one. The management did what's called cherry picking. They selected certain Lean tools and ignored others. They did not, by having that level of understanding at level 1, they could not comprehend how these Lean tools relate to one another and how they are in fact interrelated. And you cannot just adopt some Lean tools and leave others behind. They felt improvement is for others to do. It was easier to force compliance than lead. And to get to that level 5 ability for mastery, you have to study, you have to read, you have to learn new things. And in many cases, the executive mindset is one in which I've been there, I've done that, I'm now in this position, so I don't need to study, read, or learn new things. And so this is a pattern that we see widely repeated. Of course, we want to see organizations not make these kinds of mistakes. The zero-sum win-lose orientation that had long existed in this company, as I said earlier, was carried forward into their limited application of Lean tools and Lean as an operating system. And when you marginalize the interests of somebody such as employees or suppliers, I mean, these are big contributors to the value that's created in the business. And if you marginalize their interests, they're not going to participate in improvement. Lean is a non-zero-sum or win-win management system. It is fundamentally different than conventional zero-sum win-lose management. Now we recognize we don't live in a perfect world, and so things are not perfectly win-win. But what management strives to do in Lean is to achieve win-win outcomes, and people recognize that you might not win as much as you like, but you're certainly not going to lose as much as you could. And so they try to achieve balanced outcomes, and instead of fighting over the size of the slices of the pie in the left-hand image, what we're trying to do is to do what everybody would like to see happen, which is to grow the pie. Customers want better outcomes, community, employees, suppliers, investors, everybody wants a better outcome. And this idea of moving away from the win-lose to the win-win is something that Frederick Taylor advocated in the late 1800s as a principal feature of scientific management, which was also called the Taylor system at the time. So Frederick Taylor, his scientific management system was widely misunderstood and misapplied by managers in many, many organizations in the United States and elsewhere in the world. And because of that, it caused a lot of discontent among workers, and workers let their elected representatives know that they were unhappy with the so-called Taylor system. So Frederick Taylor was required to testify in front of the U.S. Congress for 3 days in 1912. And he gave extensive testimony, which is a wonderful thing to read. I recommend it highly. But I would like to encapsulate his perspective here in one sentence. In his testimony, he said, "It ceases to be scientific management the moment it is used for bad." What he was saying there is if scientific management is being used in a way in which it is zero-sum, where the outcomes are win-lose, meaning good for the company, bad for the employees, for example, then it's not scientific management. Then the company and the managers are doing something different than scientific management. And we say the same thing about Lean today. It ceases to be Lean management the moment it is used for bad. If you're using Lean in a zero-sum way, it's not Lean, you're doing something else. So you have a choice here. You can squeeze the lemon like everybody else, or you can be different and grow. And of course, it's a completely different mindset and skill set to do what's shown in the left-hand image, which is to squeeze a lemon, compared to what it takes to be a farmer of a lemon grove and to grow and cultivate lemons, to grow and cultivate your organization, the people, to work more closely with your suppliers and customers to deliver outcomes that are better for them, and of course outcomes that are better for investors as well. So what Lean is trying to say is we want to grow and improve rather than simply squeeze the lemon. So you can see that the company that did this for 10 or more years had a fundamental misunderstanding of what Lean is about. So let's look at a different organization. This is the Wire Mold Company. They're a company located in West Hartford, Connecticut, that the management team embraced both principles, continuous improvement and respect for people, doing what I characterize as real lean, in contrast to fake lean. And their achievement focus was not towards the bottom left, it was the upper right. The management team there comprehended lean as a management system for the entire enterprise. So they're looking to eliminate waste, unevenness, and unreasonableness, not just in operations, but in human resources, in information technology, in new engineering and new product development, in marketing, in sales, everywhere, throughout the organization. And in doing so, we're going to be recognizing the overarching principles, continuous improvement and respect for people. And we're going to apply lean principles, practices, methods, and tools in a non-zero-sum way. And as a result of that, they grew tremendously. Their profitability improved, their market share improved. They had overall wonderful outcomes for the business in a much shorter period of time. There was fundamentally alignment between operating practices and leadership behaviors. The pie chart on the left, you may be familiar with, it shows that in any given process, there's a small amount of work that actually adds value, there's a portion of work that's non-value added but necessary, and then there is work that is waste. And when you look at a batch and queue process and you apply Kaizen to that process, you find that 90% of the work is waste, 5% is value added, and the remainder is non-value added but necessary work. The leaders at the Wire Mold Company understood that there are ways in which leaders behave that add value, that engage people, that excite people, that motivate people. Because nobody's perfect, there are non-value added but necessary or unavoidable leadership behaviors, and then there are behaviors that are waste, that turn people off, that discourage people, that demotivate them so that they do not want to participate in improvement activities and so on. So they understood this, whereas most people do not. Management set people up to succeed. They understood management, Lean as a management system, not as a toolkit or a program or an initiative. Management accepted their role being to serve others, to serve customers, to serve employees. There was 100% management commitment to Lean, but more than that, and more importantly, there was 100% management participation in Kaizen, the application of Lean principles and practices to shop and office processes. They were active participants, team members in Kaizen, and then they were actively engaged in applying Lean principles and practices to their own management processes, the kinds of things that the executives engage in a daily basis. All leaders were learning and practicing these principles. And they eliminated performance metrics that were taking them in a direction opposite of where they wanted to go. So they got rid of measures that are commonly used in manufacturing organizations, in this example, earned hours, standard cost, purchase price variance, and so on. I want to emphasize the management participation. You know, most organizations, since Lean has its roots in operations, you would expect that somebody, an executive in manufacturing, might know something about this, but the executives in other departments would not. And so when an organization heads down this Lean path, it's usually handed off to the vice president of operations, and they're charged with improving processes and operations, while the rest of the organization has little or no knowledge of Lean and no participation of managers or people from these other parts of the company. And as a result, they don't make much progress over time. And this is pretty much what happened to the company that we talked about in the beginning that had 10 years of Lean work and didn't get very far. Whereas what you see with the Wire Mold Company is all of the managers are engaged, and it's shown in the bottom image, the blue graph. All of the managers are engaged in understanding and applying Lean principles and practices and building their knowledge over time. And the little yellow arrow above 100% means you're never done learning about Lean management. It goes on and on and on. And particularly because it's a non-zero-sum management system, there is always more to learn. Wiremold had a strategy to be a simple strategy, fits on one page, to be the leading supplier in the industries we serve and one of the top 10 time-based competitors globally. So they had an interesting set of performance measures for their base of operations. 100% customer service, 50% reduction in defects, 20% productivity gain, 20 times inventory turns, 20% profit sharing, and the use of visual controls and 5 S's. And they also had, as part of their strategy, to double in size every 3 to 5 years through acquiring companies and acquiring product lines and using quality function deployment, QFD, to introduce new products every month. And I might note here that they were very good at, they got very good at introducing new products every month by using quality function deployment, so much so that 50% of their growth came from new products, and that is a remarkable figure, 50% of growth coming from organically developed new products. So they also ensured win-win outcomes, in particular for employees. In this slide, they had what was called the qualified job guarantee, which said nobody is going to lose their job as a result of continuous improvement. The gentleman on the right that you see was the president and CEO of Wiremold, Mr. Art Byrne, who's recently written a wonderful book that I recommend highly called The Lien Turnaround, that I think you'll find extremely helpful. And they also established a no-blame environment. Basically, we're no longer going to blame people for problems. We're going to blame processes for problems. We're going to focus on the process and improve the process and not blame the people. And so these are huge changes, because in most organizations there is no qualified job guarantee. People lose their job as a result of continuous improvement. And there is also usually the continuation of a pattern of blaming people for problems. Wiremold had a code of conduct shown here, and the notable feature here is that managers held themselves accountable to this code of conduct just as they would hold any others in the organization. And so it would not be unusual for a worker at the bottom of the organization to walk up to the CEO and say, hey Art, you said be fair, and I think this decision you made is not fair. And people felt comfortable in challenging the CEO, and the CEO, Art Byrne, of course, was responsive in a positive way to these kinds of challenges, and encouraged this kind of challenge, because it showed that people were aware of things, that they were thinking of things, that they had a mindset for improvement, and so on. So the remarkable thing is Wiremold managers put both parts into practice. Now the iceberg diagram on the right-hand side is meant to indicate that the continuous improvement practices are visible. They're above the waterline. They're visible. It's something you can see by touring the facility, both in the shop and office. You can see evidence of visual controls. You can see evidence of cells in the shop and office to do process work, and so on. But the respect for people principle is the larger part of lean management, and it is below the waterline. It is more difficult to see. It is more difficult to understand. The words are simple, respect for people, and because the words are simple, people, managers, executives, think they know what that means. But it is, in fact, something that you learn by doing, by engaging processes such as Kaizen. That's where you learn about respect for people and the many nuances and details associated with that. And I'll give you a quick example. If you're continuing to use metrics such as earned hours that cause people to create products and services that have not been requested by customers, then you're essentially wasting people's time, you're wasting their lives by having them make things that are not necessary. So this is an example of disrespect for people. So the achievement focus at Wiremold, again, was at the top, both continuous improvement and respect for people, and comprehending Lean as a management system, one which would replace in its entirety conventional management, and it would do so over time as management builds their capacity and capabilities to better understand and practice lean management. It is not something that happens overnight. But because the leaders were personally engaged in Kaizen and took that learning from the shop and office floor of offices for their management processes, they were able to do remarkable things in a very short period of time. And of course, they did not have all this point Kaizen going on that remained disconnected over time. The point Kaizens were connected rapidly so that they would achieve material and information flow. The former vice chairman of Toyota, Mr. Watanabe, said, "There is no end to the process of learning about the Toyota way. I don't think I have a complete understanding even today, and I have worked for the company for 43 years. So I'd like to translate what he's saying there. What it means is non-zero-sum management system means you're never done learning. So Toyota's management system is a non-zero-sum system of management. It's what we call lean management. This means you're never done learning. In a zero-sum management system where it is I win, you lose, you're done learning about that within the first few years of one's work experience, even at a low level as a non-manager. But in a non-zero-sum management system, there is always more to learn. Let me explain it another way. In conventional management, 1 + 1 is 2. In lean management, 1 + 1 could be 1.8, it could be 2, it could be 2.1 or 2.2. It depends. So there's much more to this than meets the eye. Not only is it wonderful from the standpoint of delivering better if you do it right, to delivering better outcomes for customers and employees and suppliers, investors, and community, delivering better outcomes for the key stakeholders. It's also just a lot more fun system of management to engage in, both as leaders of an organization as well as workers in an organization. So people ask the question, well, how do you sustain lean management? You know, we're making all these these important changes and so forth. How do we keep it going? You know, there is no magic here. If you want to sustain your ability as a musician or sustain your ability in sport, you have to practice every day. And so it is exactly the same with lean. You have to apply lean principles and practices every day. Otherwise, you backslide, you fall backwards, back into the world of conventional management. So it is a commitment that everyone has to make in the organization to apply lean principles and practices on a daily basis. This is why lean has to be led. If the leader is not practicing, then nobody else will practice. If people see the leader practicing, then they too will practice. Lean means being different. You know, one of the reasons why people struggle with this is because they have a hard time accepting that fact that they have to be different. They look around at their peer group, deeply entrenched in conventional way of thinking about business, conventional way of leading people, conventional way of managing the organization, and you know, if they stick out and look different, that can be uncomfortable. But you have to embrace this idea of being different, and it's okay to be different. It's okay to do things differently, to think differently, because and there's a big reward for doing that. I mean, the outcomes for doing lean well, for understanding the intent and purpose, for applying the lean principles and practices with distinction, there are wonderful outcomes for doing that. So here are some practical actions to take. The respect for people principle looks easy, but it is in fact very difficult. So you'll need to work on this. This needs to be a major area of focus. You also need to focus on the process, not on blaming the people. When the process fails, you know, you have a situation where you have good people having to contend with bad processes. So when the process fails, blame the process, not the people. The leaders have to be much more humble, curious, and less certain about what they know. They have to question everything. You have to have a mindset of wanting to experiment and try new things. You must apply lean principles and practices to your own managerial work, and you have to learn these principles and practices through direct hands-on participation in Kaizen. There is other things you have to learn by reading various books and articles and so forth about lean management, about lean leadership, as well as doing on the job. OJL means on the job learning. And you have a challenge as a leader to make Lean fun. And if you go about this in a zero-sum win-lose way, you're not making Lean fun. You're making Lean terrible. You're making it a drudgery. You're making it something that people do not want to get involved with. So here are some, again, practical actions to take. You have to, Lean is continuous improvement and respect for people. To focus only on continuous improvement is not Lean. It ceases to be Lean management when you're doing just continuous improvement. Now, I just caution you that the respect for people, again, the words are easy to comprehend, so people think they know what it means, but I can assure you that a great deal of time is wasted. 10 years in the example, more than 10 years in the example of the first company we talked about, they thought they knew what this meant. And it turns out to be that when you look at why organizations are successful with Lean and why they fail, that the respect for people principle is the decisive factor in all successful Lean transformations. The management team worked hard to comprehend this through the application of Lean principles and practices, and made sure that Lean was practiced in a non-zero-sum or win-win way, which is a fundamental expression of the respect for people principle. So with that, I would like to thank you very much for joining today's webinar. I hope you found it interesting. There is a great deal to learn about Lean management, and it is, I have found it to be inspiring, engaging, and tremendously a fun thing to get involved with. I hope you see it that way as well. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Bob, for a very intriguing presentation. And folks, now we're open for a Q&A. If you have a question, you could either raise your hand. There's a hand icon available on your webinar console, or you could put your questions in the question box, and I'll be happy to read them over on your behalf. I see there's already a hand raised, so let me try to go and see if we can unmute. We have Brother Antonio Almeida. Antonio, can you hear us? Hello? Mr. Antonio. Hello, Mr. Antonio, you raised your hand? Okay, we can't hear you, sir, so if you could just post the question in the question box. Let me move to the question box. There's a question. Don't you think during frequent initiatives of Lean implementation, there are personality clashes, and sometimes it is hard to get people to follow and take orders from their coworkers?
Well, occasionally, but if there has been good training to explain to people the purpose and intent of Lean is to make things better, to improve people's work, to make it simpler, less mentally and physically taxing, and if one begins their Lean efforts with that in mind and ensures that the Lean does no harm, then most people will say, I'm all for that. I'd like my job to be easier. I'd like to come to work, be able to do the job with fewer errors. I don't want to get blamed for errors. I'd like to have more fun at work. I'd like my work to be more interesting because I can contribute ideas and creativity. I can engage in structured problem solving. Our ideas, when we come to work, are finally heard rather than ignored. So my experience with this, firsthand in industry and elsewhere, is that you're right. Sometimes you do run into that, but a proper presentation of what Lean is, which is rarely done, it's usually improperly presented. A proper presentation minimizes these sorts of problems.
Okay, thank you. Let me move to the next question. In one of the slides you mentioned easier to force compliance than lead. In the case of businesses where Lean implementation is successful, don't you think continuous improvement drives may be frustrating for workers? This is particularly dangerous when workers perceive managers placing all the Lean burden on them.
I'm not sure if I understand the question. Indeed, what does happen normally is managers do place the burden of continuous improvement on the workers, but the reality is management's processes, the processes that managers and executives engage in, are terrible. They're filled with waste, unevenness, and unreasonableness, and you have the fundamental problem of managers being inconsistent and saying, it's you guys that need to improve, not us. Ali, can you help me understand the question?
Yeah, I think this is the question was about also that the frustration is built upon workers as the Lean burden is placed on them. I think it's one of the bullets in the slides where you mentioned easier to force compliance than lead.
Right. Yeah, and I mean it is frustrating for workers, and it's not. It has to be led. I mean this is a new way of thinking and doing things, and so it requires a leadership rather than just mandating that others go do it. So one of the that's why I said in the presentation the managers have to learn about Lean both on the job. They've got to start reading books and articles. It's a completely different way of managing an organization. So they have to acquire a lot of new knowledge.
Okay, seems like we have more questions on the workforce side. So another one, critiques have mentioned that the single biggest drawback of Lean implementation is that the constant focus on improvement and elimination of waste becomes an obsession and causes stress in the workforce. What are your views?
Well, it ceases to be Lean the moment it is used for bad. If the outcome is, this is a very clear signal. It's like the siren going off. If it's having the effect of creating a stress in the workforce, then people need to have a timeout. They need to stop. They need to reassess what they're doing. They need to understand why it's having that effect. They need to go through a structured problem-solving process. The managers need to go through a structured problem-solving process, just like they tell the workers to go do when there's a problem, to determine why this is causing the worker stress. And they need to identify and implement practical countermeasures so that they can restore Lean to being something that's doesn't create stress. It's something that's more fun and more engaging for people, something that they want to get involved with.
Okay, another one. In your experience, what is the best way to communicate any Lean initiative at all levels in an organization?
Well, I think back to, I'm a teacher, right? So before you stand up and give a presentation, you need to know what you're talking about, right? And so that means you have to do some research. You have to go read about stuff. You have to go talk to people. You got to go look at some YouTube videos, and you have to sort through the bad sources of information and focus on the good sources of information. So one of the things that I find that as a teacher upsets me greatly is, every teacher from the beginning of from elementary school, when you're 10 years old to forward, or maybe earlier, through graduate school, teaches you how to do research. If you don't know something, you go do research, and they teach you the methodologies and so forth. But a funny thing happens when when people get out into industry and become managers, they don't do research. So if you're going to stand up and introduce Lean to an organization, you need to know what you're talking about. You need to do research. You need to go visit, some blogs, the credible ones. You need to read some books, etc. You need to go participate in a Kaizen somewhere at some other company. Start to develop an understanding of this before you stand up and say, here's what we're going to go do.
Okay, we have somebody from Toyota Saudi Arabia, Brother Hisham from ALJ, the core distributor of Toyota in Saudi Arabia. My question is about how to have balance between Lean management and quality improvement. We are trying to delight our customers at the same time trying to get Lean.
A balance between Lean management and quality improvement.
And I mean,
Yeah, I'm not sure I really comprehend that question. I mean, because I don't, you know, I see as an outcome of, you know, in your case, TPS done well, the follow-on outcome
let me
is,
see if I can unmute Brother Hisham, and if he could sort of
is
clarify or
quality
explain this
improvement. Yeah.
question. Let us see. Brother Hisham, I just unmuted you. Would it be possible for you to speak and talk directly with this?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
Brother Hisham, we can hear you now.
Yes, how are you? Actually, I just want to explain it. It's basically sometimes most of the lean initiatives that has been done within the organization might contradict with all the initiatives that we're going through in just, you know, adding extra quality, delighting our customer, because the concept of cutting and eliminating some of the areas where sometimes it might have more spending rather than just, you know, focusing on the customer delight and trying to get beyond his expectation. So how can we really build this kind of balance?
Well, I mean, this is an ongoing challenge, I think, in all organizations that strive to practice lean. Is you know, the allocation of resources in terms of you know, to deal with certain problems and issues in an organization, and sometimes the resources aren't there that are needed to achieve the sort of outcomes that you're talking about. You know, I think all I can say is that the system needs to be adaptive to, or what's a better way of putting it, the system needs to be have some awareness of in real time of when there is misalignment between objectives and desired outcomes compared to resources, and that these gaps need to be corrected, you know, quickly rather than linger for long periods of time.
Brother, you're okay. Brother Hisham, or you have any supplement? Brother Hisham, you there? Okay, well, thank you very much for asking the question, Brother Hisham. And looks like there are no more questions in the Q&A box as well. So I would like to sort of conclude it here with the note of thanks. Thank you very much, Dr. Bob, for your time, for sharing this valuable information on lean management with our attendees. Any concluding remarks that you would like to give before we dismiss out?
Yes, I would like to say thank you very much for the opportunity, and I'd also like to thank the people who asked questions. I appreciate that greatly, and I hope you'll visit the blog on my website. I think you'll find a lot of very useful and insightful information there. So thank you so much.
Well, yes, thank you very much. And again, it's bobemiliani.com, the website from where you can access more details about the Lien and about the doctor's books as well as his blog. So once again, thank you very much, Dr. Bob, and thank you all of those who attended this webinar. We are recording this, and it will be uploaded on Mile Community, community.mile.org. So please stay tuned, and I am now dismissing this webinar, ending this webinar, so you all will be automatically dismissed out. Thank you very much. You all have a good day, good evening, wherever you're calling from.